Hello, everybody. Adam Parks with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I'm here with David Reid, who is the General Counsel for RMAI, or the Receivables Management Association International. How you doing today, David?
I'm doing excellent, Adam. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I've actually really been looking forward to an opportunity for us to have a chat on the podcast. It's been a pleasure having the opportunity to work with you as I've sat on the RMAI board for the last decade and kind of learned a little bit about the evolution of the organization. I've learned a lot from you about advocacy and obviously the RMAI certification program, which is kind of the direction I want to kind of take the conversation in today. But for anybody who has not been as lucky as me to spend some time with you on the road through the years, could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Gosh, that's an interesting question. Let me try to do it in a short period of time. I sometimes am known for being long-winded, but it's one of those stories about when you make a decision when you're very young, it can influence the rest of your life and you don't even realize that you're doing it. But right out of law school, I went to work for the New York State Assembly. And when my first day at work, the chief counsel said to me, well, you can choose two committees. You can choose either education and higher education, or you can choose that you banks and, or I'm sorry, insurance or transportation. And I didn't really know much about insurance or transportation, so I said I'll do the education and higher education committees. And that one decision in that split second really has kind of controlled my career path ever since. I had, and you might be saying, well, all right, how does that work with the collection industry? But it actually, once you hear it, it kind of makes sense. So I was counsel to the Education and Higher Education Committee in both the New York State Assembly as well as the New York State Senate. In between the two, for a stint, I was also a registered lobbyist for education organizations. But when I was finishing up my fourth year working for the New York State Senate Majority Leader, I was approached by the governor's office, who I had worked with over the years in my various capacities. And they had a position that they were curious if I was interested in. And it was Deputy General Counsel at the New York State Higher Education Services Corporation. And HESC for short. Not only was responsible for the scholarships and grants in New York State, they were also the guarantee agency for the old federal family education loan program. In fact, they were the sixth largest guarantee agency in the nation. So I went there and worked for about a year and a half for the governor. And as part of being the guarantee agency, they had a huge collections floor. I want to say they probably had about between 50 and 70 employees that were part of the call service center to do collections on defaulted student loans. So long story short, the governor decided he wasn't going to run for re-election. I decided to find a new job before the next governor invited me to leave, which is a thing when you work for an elected official. So that led me to California in 2006. I was able to get a position as general counsel at a company called EdFund. It no longer exists, but it was the second largest student loan guarantor in the United States. They guaranteed approximately $32 billion under the old federal family education loan program. And they also had a collection floor. Actually, it was 2 levels and we employed about 200 debt collectors who were on the phone with the the consumers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there for about 4 years when eventually we elected a new president who decided to nationalize the student loan program and eliminate the FEL program. And so, the company I went to work for was there was a lot of acquisition, mergers, consolidation because there was only a legacy portfolio, and we were acquired by another company. Mm-hmm. So that actually brought me to DBA, now RMAI, and I've been here for this will be my 12th year working for RMAI. So hopefully that wasn't too long, but like I said,
No, I think it's an interesting story. And I know you and I talked about this, and I couldn't remember what city or what restaurant we were sitting in, but I do remember us having this conversation many years ago. I think it's always interesting to hear kind of how all different kinds of people found themselves in our particular space. But now you find yourself with RMAI as general counsel. Tell us a little bit about RMAI and what it is that you guys do there.
Yeah. Well, so RMAI, we're a nonprofit trade association. We represent over 620 companies nationwide. We have members that are headquartered in virtually every state in the country. I think there's maybe 4 states we don't have a member in. 2 of them I can remember off the top of my head. So if there's anybody who's listening from West Virginia or Vermont, welcome aboard. We represent, obviously, the debt buying industry. We were founded as the trade association representing the debt buying industry. Originally, kind of how the name evolved. When we were first founded in 1997, it was called the Debt Buyers Association. Eventually, the name transformed to DBA. Rather than the full name, we just use DBA International. And then in 2017, largely because of our national certification program, we changed our name one more time from DBA International to Receivables Management Association International, also known as RMAI. And so it's not only the debt buying industry we represent, but we also represent originating creditors. We represent third-party collection agencies, collection law firms, vendors, and specifically within vendors, and again, it ties in with our certification program. We represent process servers and brokers. We also have international members, although, perhaps that's an area of growth for us. We don't have too tremendous number of international members, but obviously we do encourage international membership as well.
So, having worked with and been going to RMAI conferences now for, I believe, 2024 will be my 18th consecutive conference.
You beat me.
Yeah, I mean, literally going back to the DBA days when the conference was at the Mirage in Las Vegas. And we've been at the Aria now for, I guess, close to a decade, if not a little longer. But
it was actually the Aria. The Aria was my very first conference, and it was the very first year it was at the Aria. So I always remember the year. That would have been 2012 was the first year at the Aria. Yeah.
So one of the things that you mentioned as we were talking was about the certification program with RMAI, of which you've been intimately involved throughout its inception and its management going forward. And one of the things that I thought would be interesting for us to talk about today is a little bit about the certification program and how that's kind of changed the discussion through the years in terms of RMAI's advocacy on a federal, state, and local level. Because it does feel like the whole storyline and everything really has changed. And, a lot of the players remain the same, but I feel like what's changed is the quality of the messaging. And I think certification becomes kind of a keystone in that overall discussion. So you've been there since the beginning. Can you talk to us a little bit about the evolution of the certification program?
Yeah, and actually, I didn't realize this at the time, but that was actually part of the reason why RMAI was interested in hiring me back in 2011. it was just my background. I'm a prolific drafter. I love drafting, whether it's policies, whether it's legislation. It's just something I very much enjoy, and I'm pretty good at it. And at the time, Mike Ben Dixon was president of the board, and Jan Steger had recently come on as executive director. It was at the time when the board of directors had decided in, I guess it would have been 2010, 2011, that they wanted to bring the association in-house rather than using an external company to manage the association. They wanted to hire employees. So Jan was employee number one. I think I might have been employee number 4. But Jan and I are still here. Employees 2 and 3 are no longer here. but when I first got on board, it was probably within a couple of months. Mike Ben Dixon and Jan, spoke to me and said, we want to develop something. We're not exactly sure what it is, but it's something to do with certification. And this is a project we'd like to put you in charge of. We're going to get you a lot of volunteers to assist in the development of it. And so pretty much for the entire, 10 months in 2012, that was pretty much all I did in addition to the government relations. But I would often sit actually exactly where I'm sitting here, and I could, when I'm in the zone, I'm in the zone. There were some days that I never got out of my chair for 8 hours. All I did was draft the certification program. And it really did take that long. It took about 10 months worth of work to develop the certification program.
That's a long time, David. That's a long time and a pretty serious commitment, but
and we had, a very large volunteer group. It was a task force that we had formed. I think we had upwards of 60 volunteers on the task force, broken into committees, and we had a central task force that Stacy Shackner had chaired. They would review my work and give me edits and point me in the right direction. And we kind of did that back and forth for 10 months and went to the board. The board approved it. And then it went to the membership and they approved it in 2013. And that's when we launched the certification program in 2013. But it really, to your point, it really was a touchstone within the industry because obviously I was for 2 years lobbying on behalf of the industry at the state level. Mm-hmm. Without the certification program. And it was challenging. I mean, I often say, this industry, while very important and valuable and needed, it's also not an apple pie and motherhood type of warm and fuzzy that you get from talking about debt collection, let's face it. And, you could really sense that when you're talking with legislators and regulators about the industry and the importance of the industry. And, and whenever you talk about the industry, obviously consumer protection, consumer rights are always, right there with it. The two are really, intricately linked. And, we really were missing that part of the conversation. And when we launched the certification program and the development of these industry best practices, it really was transformative. And I noticed it immediately in my conversations with legislators, regulators, and even consumer advocates, where we were able to advocate for common sense changes in legislation when we were negotiating and be able to point to our best practices within our certification program. And I really think every single year it really has built upon it, each year. And it's as the program has become more widely accepted, both by originators as well as within the industry. It's also become more widely accepted among regulators, attorney generals, legislators. The press occasionally references our certification program, and even the consumer advocates. I mean, I deal with consumer advocates all the time in my responsibility of negotiating state legislation. And it really has given us as close to the apple pie and motherhood as we could possibly get. I don't think we'll ever get there, but it really has helped.
I think it's a credibility statement, right? When I look at something like
Yeah.
the RMAI certification program, it's a credibility statement, and I think that the way that the certification program is structured is somewhat unique, because I remember some of the earlier conversations, and I wasn't on the board or part of certification as it was being born. I kind of came in as the organization was going through the rebranding process. I think it was 2016, and so like that was kind of my my background and my focal point. But I remember a lot of conversations around the independent auditing and having third parties that are coming in to validate that these things are being done. So it's not just saying like these are the standards, it's saying these are the standards and here's how we're validating compliance of all of those that bear the seal of certified. And I think that's a very interesting and was a very difficult task to to get into place, because even once you've got all these great ideas, then you've got to get this catalyst going of actually putting all of these things in place. It's one thing to say everybody must be certified, but now you've got to get these certified auditors together and start, communicating and organizing that group of people, those that are being certified, those that are pushing certification on their vendors, like getting all of that going simultaneously. I'm sure it took 60 plus volunteers being actively involved, because that's a major undertaking. But once you've got something like that in place, it really does change the conversation. And from as I've watched it, and as I've done lobbying through the years, even outside of lobbying, if you just think about human relationships, the easiest way to enter into a relationship between two people is by giving rather than asking, right? Like all the best relationships that you have in your life, you generally gave something where you were in need and received something, and it creates this somewhat of a bond between people. And I think when RMAI goes in from a legislative or an advocacy standpoint at this time, it's not just going in and saying, hey, I want, I need, right? We're not going in there with an ask. The organization is going in there and saying, look at the things that we're doing now, right? Like these things are working. Like, let us help you understand how we've been able to get these things in place and how we can, all work together towards a better financial future. But I think that dynamic of starting a conversation with that give versus then walking in there with an ask enables an opportunity to establish real relationships and conversations with people that may not always have the same point of view.
Yeah, it's interesting how not only RMAI has evolved with the sense of the certification program, but also how our lobbying strategy has evolved over the years.
Mm-hmm.
When I was first hired, and I was the first person to, fill this role of an employee that was focused on government affairs. But it wasn't that the board wasn't doing government affairs before I arrived. They were, but I think the strategy by and large before I came on board was if there was a bill we hated, we went in and we opposed the bill, basically saying this bill makes no sense and the bill shouldn't move forward. Things that, I guess, most lay people who aren't involved in government affairs or work for government would do all the time without, because we don't like the bill. And I told them, that was actually not the most productive strategy. That from my experience, both working for the Senate Majority Leader or Assembly Minority Leader or for the governor, when people came in and basically often in a very polite way, basically saying your bill sucks, you don't really create that type of dynamic that would encourage further dialogue. And so it's not that you're like, oh, thank you for that information, and then you don't move forward anymore. The bill continues to move forward because the legislator wants their bill to be passed.
Mm-hmm.
So, once the lobbyists who would take that approach would see the bill as like moving towards passage, they come in and say, oh, can we make amendments? And you kind of already burnt that bridge by the way your first interaction. So what I really thought was important for the association is to really listen to the legislators and what is the dynamic? What was the reason why they introduced the bill? There's usually a backstory, and it's important to understand what that backstory is, because you can't solve a problem if you don't know what the backstory is. So that was, step number one. Where did this bill come from, and what was the motivation? What are your end goal? What are you really looking to achieve? And once you get that, you can work with the legislator to try to find a mutual solution that both parties can live with. So I often, when I first meet with a legislator or a regulator for that matter, on a bill that we just can't live with, I will start the conversation by saying, listen, we appreciate your concern. We appreciate your goal. We have some concerns. Unfortunately, we can't. We oppose the bill right now, but we would like to get to either a supporting or a neutral position. And I really think we can work with you in trying to find that those mutual areas that we can remove our opposition. We're not here to kill bills. We're here to make bills work. And that type of message resonates with elected officials, with regulators. And because it keeps the conversation going.
Well, with anybody.
And we've had but anyway, right. And we've had remarkable success with that strategy. I would say well over 90% of bills that RMAI engages in, are victories. Victories in either the bill doesn't move forward anymore, or the bill is substantially amended to a place that we can be comfortable with, and the legislators happy that they're getting a bill done. And in the end, I consider that all a victory either way.
No, I very much do as well. And, I think your approach is working, right? Like the interaction and the involvement that the trade association has been able to have with regulators and legislators as they've been going through these processes are being heard with open ears when we're kicking things off with talking about certification and working together and finding those areas of mutual concern and taking out those roadblocks of what are ultimately and usually unintended consequences, right? That they're just not seeing from their perspective or from their vantage point. Well, David, I really want to thank you for coming on and having a chat with me today. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I'm hoping that I can get you back on here again in the future for an additional discussion. There's so many different things that you're working on. It's just hard to stay on top of the relevancy because things change so rapidly in your world.
Well, and anytime. I really appreciate the opportunity, Adam, to come on. And like I said, I am a little long-winded, but we could probably talk for hours on any of these topics. I definitely enjoy sharing the background with about RMAI and our certification program, especially. It really is a unique program within the industry, and even broader than just our industry, because I know some regulators point to our certification program for other industries that are looking at developing a certification program, because they like a lot of the elements that we've built into our certification program, including independent third-party audits, including the annual review of the program standards and the like. So anytime, happy to join you.
Well, we'll definitely have you back on here again. For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions that you'd like to ask David or myself, you can leave those in the comments on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we'll be responding to those. If you have additional topics that you'd like to see us cover, you can leave those in the comments as well. And hopefully I can get David back on here to continue helping me create great content for a great industry. But thank you, everybody, for watching. David, I will see you again soon, I'm sure. And everybody, thank you for watching.
Thank you, Adam.